All right, so we can get started. So welcome to the open conversation on breaking silos in language education. My name is Ferran Sunyer, and I have the pleasure to be co-organizing this event with Colleen Starks. We are both members of the CU.mil, which stands for the Circle U Multilingualism, Interculturality and Language Lab. This event wouldn't have been possible without the financial support of the European Union through the Erasmus Plus program, and of course, Circle U. This is an online event that is part of a larger project that is devoted to creating synergies between language teachers across the Circle U Alliance. And now I will hand it over to Colleen Stars, who will be saying a few words about this project.
Okay, thank you very much, Ferran. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Circle U Language Teachers Nexus yet, it is a community of practice for Circle U language teachers. So you might be wondering, why did we decide to create this community of practice across the Circle U Alliance, and how did we go about setting it up? Well, to answer the first question, we felt that Circle U provided a really great opportunity to create a hub or a place for language teachers to come together to share their expertise and knowledge, and also to discover new practices and innovative pedagogy that from the language teachers at the different partner universities. We also felt that it would be an excellent opportunity to foster collaboration and partnerships across the Alliance, and it would enable teachers to engage in lifelong learning and to reflect on their teaching practices. So how did we go about creating this community of practice? Well, first of all, we thought it was important to identify local coordinators at the partner universities who would be responsible for getting the community of practice off the ground at the local level. And once we had found colleagues willing to do this, we started with the onboarding and training phase. Then the community of practice was officially launched at the kickoff event at UC Louvain in January 2025. And at this event, teachers were able to network, meet new colleagues, and leave the event with practices that they could then carry out at their local community of practice. Afterwards, we moved on to the facilitation phase, and here the aim was to establish the community of practice even more at the local level and to engage in some collaboration between the various partners. And it ended with a follow-up event organized at King's College London, organized by the local coordinators there in June 2025. And once again, this event provided an opportunity for teachers to meet one another, to share their expertise, and to foster further collaboration. So what's been happening since then? Well, we have three main objectives that we're working on. First of all, we really want to anchor the community of practice at the local level because we think this is really important for the success of the project. And for example, at UC Louvain, where I work, we have 12 teachers that work together in the community of practice on a regular basis. Secondly, we want to develop the cross-alliance collaboration even more. And some examples include a paper that some of the local coordinators wrote regarding the challenges and benefits of setting up communities of practice rather. Then we also have an ongoing research project looking at the perceived learning gains experienced by teachers as a result of being involved in the community of practice. And a third example is the journaling project, which Amélie is going to talk to us about later on today. And finally, our third objective is to create more online and on-site events where teachers can come together to share their experiences and exchange with one another. As I already mentioned, there have been 2 on-site events already, and we're very happy to say that there will be a third on-site event organized at the University of Vienna in August and September 2026, organized by the local coordinator and his team there. And in the meantime, we think it's important to keep the momentum going. So we are planning to organize a series of online events so that teachers can come together to talk about important and relevant topics and leave with inspiration and ideas for their classes. Today's webinar is the first in the series, and we will be organizing another one in spring 2026. So that was the project in a nutshell. And now I'll hand you back to Ferran, who will get today's proceedings underway. You just need to turn on your microphone, Ferran.
Okay, it happens always one time every meeting. Yeah, sorry. I forgot to mention that we are very happy that so many people have registered for this event. So we got more than 70 registrations. That's really great in a time where you have probably very busy schedules, right? So thank you so much for attending this event. Let me say a few words about the structure of today's event. So we have two parts. In the first part, we have the actual open conversation. And this is, it has a first sub-part where we have a keynote presentation by Professor Åsta Haukås, and then we'll have a panel discussion with three panelists, Julie André, Lisbeth van Vossel, and Lisa Oberreiter. Then we'll have a short break, and then we'll be moving on to the second part of this of today's event. We'll have the colleague Christopher Hank from Humboldt University in Berlin and Amalie Boubacar from King's College London presenting some good practices. And I think now I would like to say a few words about the housekeeping rules before we move on to the introduction of our first speaker. So please keep your microphones switched off during the presentation so that we can avoid having some background noise. Then you have seen we have a chat for questions when we open the floor for questions. And of course, you can also switch on your mic and ask the questions orally too. Please notice that we are testing today the automated translation captions feature offered by Zoom. So you can select the different languages being offered. There are plenty of them. So you choose the regional language and then the target language where you want the speech or the discussion to be translated into. And then, as you might have already noticed, we're video recording the event. This is one of the requirements for this open conversation format. And now we are moving on to present our plenary speaker. Åsta Haukås is professor at the University of Bergen. She teaches German language pedagogy at all levels in the teacher education program and in the postgraduate certificate in education. She's a highly respected researcher in our field with an impressive publication record. Her research interests include teachers' professional development, teachers' motivation, and the effects of knowing multiple languages, multilingualism. This is one of the keywords today. And one of her recent articles inspired the theme of today's event, and that's why we're very happy, Åsta, that you found some time to share your insights, your thoughts on this with us. We are really looking forward to the presentation, and now the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ferran and Colin, for inviting me, and hello, everyone. I will now share my screen with you. Let's see. And yes. So again, thank you so much for inviting me. And I heard the word collaboration all the time from Colin and Ferran in the introduction, which I really like because that's then the topic of my talk as well. And before I get started talking about collaboration, I wanted to clarify one thing and an important thing, I think, and that is who is multilingual in school. And it's important for me to highlight that multilingual students, when I say that, that means all, because all students in schools are multilingual. They are learning more than one language. I don't know of any country where students only learn one. So multilingual students are not a subgroup, for example, students with immigrant backgrounds, it's all. And it's important that all these students, no matter what backgrounds they have, got the chance to see their multilingualism as a resource for themselves and for society in general where they are living. And actually, this is what I said now is actually what we can read in our core curriculum in Norway, where it says that all pupils shall experience that being proficient in a number of languages is a resource, both in school and society at large. So this is fantastic, of course, but then the question is that true? do all pupils experience this? And how can we support students in actually seeing all their languages as resources within and across all their languages they know and are learning? And to do that, teachers need to teach multilingually and to implement multilingual pedagogies in their teaching. And there are different takes on what multilingual pedagogies is, and I won't go into details, but for me, I normally say that there are 4 key principles that should be considered when teaching multilingually. And the first one is that let the students' full linguistic repertoire become a resource in their language learning. That means that they should become aware of that their languages that they have are valuable for their language learning, and that knowledge from other languages can be used as resources for learning a new language, but also learning a new language can be an important resource for learning more and understanding more about languages you already know. For example, learning German can make you become more aware of structures and language patterns in your Norwegian, for example. And it's also a point about highlighting and valuing all the students' repertoires, and just to look at how many languages are actually present in one student, but also in a classroom. Number 2 is to build bridges between the languages the learners know, so to support them in seeing connections between their languages. And that can, of course, be done by the teachers teaching about similarities and differences, but perhaps even more meaningful is to give students the chance to explore similarities and differences with various activities that you implement in your classroom. And transfer of learning strategies is also very important. For example, in Norwegian class in Norway, there's a lot of emphasis on reading strategies, perhaps also a little bit in English, but then very little in German, for example. So how can we help students become aware of the fact that these learning strategies can be helpful in all of the languages? Some students transfer strategies by themselves, but very many are not really aware that they can transfer them and use them in all the languages. And that could make the learning much more effective if this is done and if they're helped doing so. And the 4th point, and the main point today, is that collaboration with language teachers in other subjects and other language subjects is important. If language teachers of different subjects in school could talk more with each other and work more together, then they could help the students see that all their languages actually are part of a bigger whole, and that they can draw on their knowledge and strategies across these language subjects. So those are my 4 key principles. But looking into research, there isn't really much research on the topic, which surprises me. I'm actually a previous language teacher myself, teaching Norwegian, English, and German, and Norwegian as a second language. So for me, it was quite natural to see this language subject as a coherent whole and that they had many similarities. But that's in fact not so if we look at the existing studies. You see at the bottom of the list, there are 2 publications by myself and also with my colleague Eli Marie Drange that I will go more into later on. But the whole thing about my interest in researching this topic came from my publication in 2016, because then I asked a group of language teachers, 12 lower secondary language teachers, to what extent they collaborated with teachers of other language subjects. And all of them said, no, it doesn't exist. That was the answer from Toril, one of the teachers. And this was actually the answer I got from everyone. And many of them had never thought about the possibility of collaborating across language subjects, but they liked the idea and they said, yes, why not? And they could also come up with many ideas for collaboration when I asked them. So this inspired me a lot to continue in this field. So what then can language teachers collaborate on? I asked, as I said, the teachers back in 2016. But now, last year, we published another article looking into teachers of 4 different upper secondary school, what their ideas were for teacher collaboration. And these teachers, just like in the previous one, had never collaborated across before, but they were, most of them, quite positive to doing so. And they had many ideas. For example, developing a shared meta-language to talk about language, focusing on writing strategies, awareness of different genres, communication strategies, and so on. So there was no lack of ideas. But when we analyzed those ideas in more depth, we found that they were mostly ideas at the, what we say, surface level. And we are drawing now on a model by Little from 1990, where she says that collaboration, or is it coordination? Coordination is more if you kind of give people different tasks, but you don't really talk deeply about why you do so and what the point is, or work together. So in school, there is a lot of storytelling and scanning for ideas. That means I say something that I do in my classroom, and then maybe some of others will pick up the ideas. That's a very low level of collaboration. Then there is aid and assistant, which means that you perhaps ask people, do you want me to give you advice, for example? Sharing would be to share materials with each other. So it's a bit more commitment from the teachers. And then towards the very right is the joint work, which is the ideal for me and also for Little, that you really sit together and you decide on the shared goals and what you want to achieve, and you work together throughout the collaboration period. So then I would like to present some findings from the article that Ferran talked about, a good example of collaboration across language subjects in one upper secondary school. This was also a school where teachers had never worked together before across the language subjects. They had collaborated with other subjects, but never across languages. And they decided to start small, since they had never done it before. And you can read more details about this study in this article, if you like, but I'll take you through some of the highlights. First of all, how long should they work together? They decided to plan for a full week of intense collaboration at the start of the school year. And this was the start of the year when the student didn't really know each other well from before entering upper secondary school. They decided to use all language lessons in that week. So that means all Norwegian lessons, English lessons, German and Spanish lessons. And altogether, that meant there were 12 lessons that were at their disposal. And they also dissolved the names of these subjects. So there was no English lesson or Norwegian lesson. All of them were a continuum. So they made a plan for 12 different lessons. And if you were teaching number 6, you were a Norwegian teacher originally, but then you would do what was planned for lesson 6 in that week. So they were all languages teachers that week and not Norwegian teacher or English teacher. So here are some of the goals that they decided on, and they were quite ambitious, I think. First of all, they wanted their students to see connection across their languages. What similarities are there? What differences are there? They also wanted the students to develop a multilingual identity to help them see themselves as multilingual and ideally also be proud of being multilingual. And that's linked to the next point, that they wanted to give students the ability to master languages isolated but also across, to talk about languages and be motivated by this. More specifically, they wanted to teach about word classes. So this is something, of course, all students have learned about before, but have a repetition, and what the word classes look like across the language subjects in school. Sentence structure, to use meta-language to talk about sentences, main clauses, subordinate clauses, and so on, and talk about this across language subjects. How languages are learned. Sorry, I cannot see here now because of the move up here. How languages are related. So look at similarities and where languages come from. and specifically also about transparent words as a language learning strategy. So to look for in texts or when you listen to words that are very similar or similar across languages that you know or are learning. So this is just a brief overview of what was done. This is a challenge for you that it's in Norwegian, and see how much you understand. But the first day, the goal was to develop students' metalinguistic awareness. So they would talk about and explore what languages they have in common, what languages they know in the classroom, and they were drawing their language portraits. They were also talking about why they should learn more languages. What's the reason? Is there a need for it? And for this, they had prepared quite a lot in advance. So they had video interviewed celebrities who have had great benefits of knowing multiple languages in their profession. For example, professional soccer players. So that was the kickoff Monday. Then on the Tuesday, they looked at relationships between languages. They studied the language tree, which languages they knew and where that could be placed in the language tree, and which other languages were in the same family. They explored transparent words and were asked to make lists of as many words they could find that were similar in Norwegian, bokmål and nynorsk, and English, German and Spanish, and to discuss why they are so similar. They learned also the word etymology here. Word classes, so introduction, what is a word class and why it's important to know about them. They would discuss what word classes we have in the different language subjects, and also to provide examples, for example, of what is an adverbial in each of the languages that they were learning. And towards the end of that day, they were asked to make a poster about one word class, and then to hang it on the wall and with examples from all the languages, and to present this to the other students. Syntax was the topic on the Thursday, where they were looking into sentence structures across these languages. Why is that important to know? And so on. And they also got a visitor there, a researcher, who talked to them about how to analyze sentences and the point of the whole thing. Yes, that's very much like a very short version of what was going on. On the Friday, the students were giving an evaluation survey to see what they had of this whole week. Most students really liked it, and they found it motivating as well. But at the same time, some of them questioned the point of the week. What was this? Was it a fun start of the school year, or what was it for? And when I interviewed the teachers later on, this was something that many of them talked about, that maybe they should have been much more explicit about the point of the whole week for the students, and that this was knowledge that they would draw on in the respective subjects throughout the school year to help them learn their languages and also see connections across the languages. For the teachers, the main outcome was actually the professional development they perceived themselves. They found it very rewarding to collaborate across language subjects. They learned so much from each other. And as some of them said, I've seen now my language subject in a new light. It's not just my language subject, it's part of a bigger whole in a school, and that was really valuable for them. So moving on now to another project that is more recent, that means Eli Marie Drange, my good colleague and friend from University of Agder, and also partly my master student Vanya Del Prete, have collaborated on teacher collaboration in 3 upper secondary schools. This was past the previous school year. It's part of a bigger research project funded by the Norwegian Research Council, which is called Multilingualism. Anyway, in this project, we thought that it's important that we discussed with teachers before we get started what it means to collaborate. What's their understanding? of collaboration, how much should I be involved or not, and actually also what it means to collaborate to enhance multilingualism. So there should be, at the starting point, an awareness-raising event in all schools to try to have the teachers have similar goals. Nevertheless, these 3 schools decided on different ways of doing this in the school year. And I would now show you some very brief examples from each of the schools. So School A and School B were inspired by the study I've already talked about to have a language week. One of them had language weeks, so 2 weeks, but in the beginning of the school year, and they developed their own activities. And here is one example from School A. This was their kickoff event where all students were gathered in the aula. And in the beginning of the sessions, all students were asked to get up who identified as multilingual. And then there were all kinds of activities throughout that 1 hour, for example, to see how much they understood of a text written in 12 different languages. And to experience that if they did this task together, they will actually be able to solve the whole text and understand the whole text. So to get the multilingualism in collaboration is better than the individual one. And this is the picture towards the end where those who identified as multilingual should get up. And as you can see, that was a big success. Most of them said they are. They were also asked to make TikTok videos for younger students who have not yet decided to learn a second foreign language, so German, French, or Spanish, and to try to convince them with good reasons why they should do so. In School B, they also had these project weeks. They started out with language projects, and this was perceived as very nice for both students and teachers. And these portraits remained on the classroom walls throughout the whole school year. And they found this was a very good way of getting to know each other better as they were new in school. They also had a very nice whole day activity where they studied the use of language among football commentators. What do you do with your language when you have to speak very fast and comment on a sport event live? And they were then, after having identified their language structures and way of speaking, they were asked to present or being commentator of their own sports event, an event that they found on YouTube. In the third school, they decided not to work jointly in the way that was done in the first 2 schools. So they decided on some key topics that each teachers could take into the classroom and focus on the way they found best during the school year. So they had what they called bell ringers, which was an activity that should take a few minutes in the beginning of each class to focus on a language structure or typical mistakes or so on. And then the teachers could decide themselves what to focus on. They also tried to get an overview of the grammatical terms that we used in that school in each language subject to try to coordinate it better and not confuse students with very different terminology across the language subjects. All right, time is running, and this also perhaps sounds like everything went really well, but I can assure you it didn't. And we learned a lot this journey about what works and what's important to have in place to actually have a successful collaboration. And we've tried to make a little model of what's important to keep in mind when people are collaborating. And the first point is leadership. Leadership must be involved so that, for example, when starting up a collaboration, it's really, really important to share information to all participants, and so that all participants are on board and also think that this is a good idea. Leadership should also be responsible for establishing structures so that it's possible to collaborate. So for example, make sure that there is time during the school day, at least once a week, where you can actually meet to collaborate. During the implementation, it's also important, we find, to have a coordinator among the collaborating teachers who have more responsibility than the others. And that this coordinator also establishes meeting points for the others and follow up on the plans and what they have said they are doing. Collaboration, as I said, it's important to clarify what you mean by collaboration, by reflecting about it, and also to decide on shared aims and goals that everyone find realistic and possible to do during a busy school day or school year. And that the aim should be to develop joint work collaboration. We saw that in the two first school, there is more valuable outcomes, both for students and teachers, than in the third school, where it was more separate and fragmented in a way. And to share milestones and experiences with each other along the way. That's also very motivating for the participating teachers. Regarding content, exactly what to focus on, it's extremely important that all teachers know about each other's subject curricula. So this is an important start of a collaboration project, to actually read the curricula of the others and to try to identify aims and goals that you could work on. We also saw that it's a good idea to share plenty of resources about how you can teach multilingually. That's not necessarily something people are aware of how to do. So to get a lot of ideas, like in the two first schools, made them get started, and also to have a lot of very nice ideas themselves. And then it's the implementation part, which is not a minor thing at all. So how to enact and implement multilingual pedagogies is not easy if you have never done it before, neither in your own class or across languages. So to stay in touch with each other and talk about how this can be done and how you can transfer language knowledge and strategies across subjects. This was made as a model for teachers, but we have found, as we have discussed, that this continuous reflection and evaluation that should be done all the time is also very often dependent also on teacher educators facilitating the process. There's a lot of new things to think about here. First of all, to collaborate across subjects, language subjects, and also what does it mean to teach multilingual pedagogies. So it has been really meaningful for us to follow up on these schools. We hope it has also been meaningful for them to get some support from us. But our main insights is also that we can take what we have learned back into teacher education and maybe prepare new teachers more for a new future where they also can work more together, and that they see this as a natural thing instead of something very special. And I think that's what I had time for now. So thank you so much for listening. This is a reference list, but I guess I can share my presentation with you, Ferran, or Colleen, and you can share it with the participants. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Åsta. It was a very inspiring presentation, especially this model of teacher collaboration, that makes things very clear on how to get organized in terms of collaboration. But what we liked the most is how practice-oriented your research is. I think that's the most inspiring thing. We can just move on to the panel discussion now, and let me briefly introduce the three panelists. So we first have Julie André, who is a student in our BA program in more languages and specializes in German and English. Then we have Liz Oberreiter. She's a student in the MA teacher education program at the University of Vienna and specializes in English and history. And then we have Lisbeth van Vossel. She's a PhD student at the UC Leuven, and her research focuses on communities of practice. So the floor is yours, Julie.
Thank you.
From closer.
Good morning. I hope you hear me well. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part of this conference. And I wanted to say that the presentation and article, I read the second one you presented, were truly enlightening. And I found it really interesting for multiple reasons. And the first one could be that I've been in several schools during my
Childhood.
childhood. I've been through like 8 different schools in Ghana and Belgium, in French, English, and Dutch. And I always had the impression that it was always the same type of teaching, like always the students sitting down, listening, and the teachers and professors just simply, let's say, giving the courses. But by reading your article and seeing all the professors that are here for this conference, it really gives me hope. And I think it's really interesting and it's great to see all of you seeking for a new way of giving course. And I think that's really great for the future. And a next point is that here at the university, so I'm in my second year of bachelor, and I have 3 courses of linguistics. So I have French, English, and German linguistics course. And my question would be, at the university, could it be possible to design a linguistics course that combines 2 languages, English and German, that are built on shared foundation and avoid unnecessary repetition, so avoiding having 2 separate courses and having one instead. And so what criteria should be considered, and do you think such course should be realistically implanted? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Julia, for first of all, your feedback and also telling me a bit about your background and also your very good question. So to have what I would say a contrastive linguistics course is what you are asking for, right?
Yes.
And I think it's, in one way, it's back to the past, because actually when I was a student, I had such a course. So it was contrastive linguistics, German and Norwegian. And it was very focused on similarities and differences and how to be able to talk about them. And I think there should be some courses like that, but actually, like you say, there is no such a course now in Bergen. And I think that could be very useful for students because it will help them in a very structured way to see and to talk about similarities and differences, which we know is a big support for them also when teaching. Because if you are teaching languages, it's always valuable to know about other languages that the students know and are learning. Mm-hmm. But actually next year we are going to start a course that you are now asking for here in Bergen. We call it Multilingualism in the Classroom, and it's for language teacher education students, so pre-service teachers of English, German, French, and Spanish. And a big part of that is to talk about how to use meta-language to describe languages and to compare languages. There should be a special focus on the language you are preparing to become a teacher for, but also to be able to describe the language structures of the other languages. So that's a key aim of that course. Another thing that I think is important is maybe also not to just have 2 different languages, but to be able to, like you said, you would like more activity from the students. So perhaps not that all of us are expert in saying this language is that, this language is that, and this language is that, but to facilitate students to explore their own languages and what's similar and different between them. So in a way that you don't have to be an expert of all the languages the students know, but how to support them in finding and identifying structures that are similar and to be able to talk about them. For example, some teachers have said to me, but I cannot teach multilingual because I don't know Polish, because we have Polish students in our class. But that's not necessarily the point. It's probably impossible to know all languages in a classroom. But if you can encourage and know ways that the students themselves can find out, because many Polish students don't know about Polish structures either, because they learned it as small children. But how can you help them become aware and be detectives of their own language learning journey?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Now, Liz, if you want, it's your turn.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. First of all, thank you so much, Åsta, for this really very insightful presentation. And of course, thank you to Ferran as well for inviting me. As you already mentioned, I'm studying to become an English and history teacher. So my second subject is actually not a language, which I do think kind of maybe it helps offer a perspective that many pre-service teachers, but also in-service teachers have, which is that you might be a foreign language teacher or a language teacher, but of only one language. Here in Vienna, and from my understanding, this is perhaps a more international situation. There really is no cross-language collaboration in teacher education. I know nothing of what other students of other languages are learning, of what they're doing. My classes are specific, so I have English as a foreign language didactic courses and nothing else. And so there's really no meaningful interaction in this sense with other teaching students. In part, I do think because at my university, at least, the departments that we study at are completely different. So I'm isolated. I'm in the English department. I don't know what goes on at, for example, the Romance language department. And I think something that I kind of kept thinking about is that when we don't model this collaboration at the teacher education level at universities, I think it becomes much harder for in-service teachers to then collaborate because it's something that they've maybe never even heard of, they've never thought about. And the first time you hear of something, you might be a bit intimidated. You might think, oh, like you said, but I don't speak Polish. I don't even speak French. How could I collaborate with, for example, the French teacher? And I think it's such a pity as Vienna, Austria, really all of Europe is so multilingual and there's such a diverse student and teacher population that it's just a pity that the teacher preparation really doesn't reflect that. Even though I think the Austrian curriculum also mentions multilingualism, but practice is, of course, always a bit different. Basically already answered my first question, which was of how could that look like in what could preparation look like at the university level. But I was also wondering if perhaps kind of what ideas you have to kind of educate in-service teachers on this. Is it, I don't know, maybe, should it be maybe more top-down or bottom-up, or just what could it look like to encourage teachers to give it a go, basically?
Thank you so much, Liz. First of all, I think you're very right that very few in-service teachers have at all learned anything about this in their teacher education, just like we have seen now in our research. So that's not at all to blame them. Actually, I blame us, the teacher educators. So why hasn't there been more about these topics in teacher education? And then and I think I've also looked into collaboration, and I have seen that primary school teachers work quite a lot together. They collaborate a lot. Lower secondary, a bit more, also quite a lot. Upper secondary, almost nothing. And then higher education, us, teacher educators, how much actually do we collaborate across language subjects? And I think we are the worst in class, so to say, to collaborate. So I think we have to look in different direction to see how we can come together and facilitate this collaboration by having our language teacher students be together. And maybe it's a result of less money now at universities. More and more universities actually teach their students together. So English and German future teachers will be together in class, so that can facilitate this. But I think your question about how to train in-service teachers, I think the way we have done it now is maybe a way to give them a lot of freedom to explore, but to also support them by giving them rich materials, ideas to talk about and look into the curricula of each other's subjects. So I hadn't time to talk too much about it, but before we had these 3 class schools, we had one school where we failed completely. And And I could talk a lot about that as well, but I think we failed also because we had two top-down plans. You said it. So we had planned for a whole school year with very nice workshops and events, but the school day is very busy. And one day, half of the group came, and the other time there was another group, and they were not properly informed by the leadership. That's why we said it's so important with leadership information. They didn't go into depths. It was very superficial collaboration that they had. So actually we found this to be a failure, but we learned so much from it. And that is to give a lot of autonomy and freedom to the teachers, but still be there to support them well in the process, and then to become more and more independent, I think. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, Lisbeth.
Yes, some of my questions are already answered, actually. So thank you so much, Åsta, for your interesting presentation, for sharing your insights and experiences as well on the practical level. And as you mentioned, or as we spoke about, you have the primary, secondary, and tertiary level. And I think it's even more at this university level that the silos are even bigger than at school level. I was also wondering how we could engage and motivate teachers at all school levels to collaborate in such bottom-up approaches. So the top-down approach isn't always working that well. So how could we engage? Because if we're talking about research projects, we mostly speak about the successful projects. But I think there might be also many teachers in schools who don't like the idea to change their habits, or they don't know how to start with it. And is our system ready for such bottom-up approaches, or how could we motivate people more to engage in such approaches, such as communities of practice or other forms of teacher collaborations within schools or across schools even?
It's a big and important question. Yes, I think it's very difficult to kind of force people to collaborate. So that's also why it's so important to, I think, come to a school, for example, if I should try to get them started, to try to make them enthusiastic about it, to give good reasons why. But another way to do it that we are trying out now, I've got a new postdoc, Camila Spaliviero, who will be with me now for 2 years, and we will now try it more at the kind of minimum level. We will have 3 teachers collaborating, so to identify teachers who are willing. So 1 teacher for Norwegian, 1 for English, and 1 for the second foreign language, so it can be Italian or French or German. And for them to explore how it can be done, both when it comes to planning infrastructure and to spread their learning and enthusiasm and what do's and don'ts with the others, to kind of expand it little by little, and to be aware that collaboration and having new structures of working together takes time, and to be realistic about that it's one step after the other. But I can say that for those schools that we have been working with now, all of them wanted to continue. We are not more involved, but they have gone on and tried to also make better what they didn't feel went that well. I can also add one thing, and that is that some teachers are hesitant for different reasons. For example, we saw that some of the new teachers were a bit hesitant, and I can understand, because they are already overwhelmed by everything going on in school when you are a new teacher. So I'm going to teach French, and suddenly I have to think about Norwegian and English as well. It's too much for me. So they were kind of leaning a bit back and thinking, I have to wait a few years. But then in one of the schools that we were working with, there were very new teachers. For example, the sport commentator, that was part of one of the teachers' master thesis. But they said that it was really nice to work together with experienced teachers, so they were not that involved in the planning, but they could kind of hang on and be part of it. And now they felt so much stronger and more prepared to take a bigger part the next year. So perhaps also giving different responsibilities to different teachers with different needs.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I think it's a very nice way to foster such collaboration. And I think it could also be necessary to change policy in schools to give people more time to collaborate on such things, because most of the time it's always something extra, and that's also a big constraint teachers are talking about if they are explaining why they are not participating in such a project. There's no time for it. So I think that's also something that should be fostered from a more policy level. But I hope there will be more projects in the future like this at all school levels.
I fully agree with it. It has to be feasible within the working week, and not just something extra that some very few, very dedicated teachers can do.
Okay, great. We have time for a very short question from the audience. I don't know if there are some. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Fabiola.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, thank you for this very inspiring presentation. I am PhD student and I'm working on designing on serious game on virtual reality, in particular on strategies of intercomprehension strategies. And I'm already quite familiar with the language portrait tool, but I'm really fascinated by the football field model. And I would like to ask you if could you elaborate how this model is used in the classroom?
Yes. So this was then this activity was developed by one of the teachers, and what they did was to first of all show kind of parts of football commentary, and to ask students to pay attention to what is the language, how does this, and it was English. So what happens to the language when a commentator comments live on a sports event? And what you see is that, for example, the verbs are shortened. There are very short sentences, they are not complete. And in a way, first individually and then together, to try to pin down the key characteristics of this special language variety, which is football commentary. I'm not good at football at all, so I don't know. But and then to talk about this typical traits of this language variety, and then to find their own sports event and rehearse. This was a whole day activity, actually, to rehearse for a few moments how to comment on it using that kind of language. And then to reflect on how it went, and hopefully that they gained some increased language awareness through this activity.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for the discussion. I have written down 3 points that I think summarize very well what we have been discussing so far. So we talked about the importance of cultivating cross-language collaboration between teachers already during the teacher education program. That's a very important thing. Then also the importance of providing concrete materials for the different educational levels, and perhaps fostering teacher-researcher collaboration as we have seen now with this football commentary example. And then also I found it very interesting to accept and to value those experiences that where you fail, but you fail forwards, right? And I recently learned from Lisbeth, who is attending the meeting too, the event too. I heard about these emergent phases, how important it is to value these experiences that lead up to the success stories. Yeah, this might be also inspiring for teachers to get engaged in those collaborations. So thank you so much, Åsta, for the keynote presentation. Thank you to all the respondents. And now it's time for a short break. We're going to be back at 11:30 sharp. Thank you so much, and see you in 5 minutes. Thank you, Åsta.
Okay, so welcome back, everybody. It's 11:30, so we'll get started with the second part of the session. First, thanks again to Åsta for your very insightful and interesting plenary talk. And now we're going to be moving on to the sharing of good practices, followed by an interactive discussion. So we're really delighted to have two Circle U language teachers here with us today to present best practices that they use in their classrooms. So first of all, we have Christopher Hank from Humboldt University of Berlin, who will be presenting his project on reading aloud in tandem pairs, a sound experiment. And this talk will be followed by Amélie Boubacar from King's College London, who will be presenting her project about journaling at university. So Christopher will start first, followed by Amélie, and when both presenters have finished, there will be some time for discussion and questions at the end. So Christopher, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks very much, Colleen. Thanks everyone for being here. Thanks to Åsta and her respondents for a great way to begin the session. Speaking of collaboration, I hope that you'll see what I'm about to share with you requires collaboration from the very beginning to the very end. And so I hope you see how it fits into our program for today. Excuse my voice, I'm recovering from Corona once again, so hopefully it will hold out. If you can't hear me, please let me know. Anyway, this idea I've had, reading aloud tandem program, has been rumbling around in my mind for, I don't know, a dozen years or more. Here are two of my children 10 years ago when I first had a poster for this for a conference, and I took this picture of them doing what most literate people do, often happily, especially for their children, reading aloud to them. And so this whole program is based on a very, very simple idea, using materials that everybody has, and hopefully in a structured way that can help tandem pairs. Before I get started, the main part of the collaborative process that I haven't been able to get in motion yet is getting teachers of different languages to be able to coordinate and have students of different languages getting together in one space at one time to get them started on this process. Okay, so let me talk to you. This is basically a half-hour presentation that I'll be cramming into 15 minutes, so I'll have to skip quite a bit. The question is why? Well, what is this all about? And I think we've all been in the situation where we're in a context where we have to speak in another language that we don't know very well. We're definitely not fluent in it. And we sit there, putting together sentences in our mind and often not saying anything and ending up in what I call a cloister of silence. Maybe we'll call it a silo of silence for this particular presentation, and not saying anything at all because you're not sure exactly how to articulate it. And you have so many ideas in your mind and you can't go forward with them. So we all know that teaching pronunciation is a big pain in the ass. It's not something that in a large classroom context works very well. There have been many ideas about it, but very few that have actually worked. I've had students in the past who've done reading aloud on their own at home or to their dog or cat. And that's nice. The problem is sometimes they end up fossilizing some of their language errors that way. So that's why my idea here is for two people from two different language backgrounds, I'll say for this presentation, German and English, to have sustained speech, just reading out what's on the page. It's already there for you. The focus here is on articulating your words and not so much about the vocabulary and grammar. It's already there. Whoever has written it for you has thought about that. So taking away this part of the equation lowers what Krashen calls the affective filter, which is our emotional blockage, wanting to be perfectionists, etc., and should increase your ability to get words out of your mouth, also exercising your vocal apparatus in the process, and getting peer feedback. And this is a very important part about it. It's not like reading alone. You're reading to a native speaker of the other language and can get immediate feedback on what is going well and what could use a little improvement, okay? So the question is how to do this. This is very basic discussion of the method, but before we get into implementation, you have to prepare people. And I think this is where we as teachers, language teachers, really, this is our role, because either as a full course or as some kind of other program, first of all, you have to have pairing of the tandem partners. That's another story I won't really get into here. But you have to kind of train them to read aloud. Everybody thinks they can read aloud, but I'm sure we've all heard people who just read by rote and have a very monotone voice. It is a skill, it is an art. And the main thing is getting learners to think about what Gilbert calls prosodic cues. That includes intonation, stress, tempo, rhythm, pausing, chunking. These are all the things that make a language alive, okay? Just not words being spoken from off the page. And in this case, we want our learners to be very conscious, activating their so-called monitor, and figuring out, okay, if I have this page in front of me, how can I chunk it? What should go up? What should go down? I'm not saying that every tandem partner is going to go this far with it. This is the ideal method, let's put it that way, that people should do this together. We have to teach them about content dynamics, how the same words can sound very different depending on the content that you mean, the connotations. Reading with feeling, this is the most important thing. If you have people who go through this program who can't learn how to read with feeling, it's not going to work very well. They need to kind of insert themselves into the text and be like actors, basically emoting, let's say, finding their voice. My colleague Dagmar Froning found that this method is a way for non-native speakers to create their own voice, because they can practice it and they can think about how they want to sound. This is something that most native speakers never get unless they are actors or actresses. Our goal should be listener-friendly speech. Doesn't have to be perfect, especially at the lower levels, but that listeners who are native speakers can understand it. That's the main thing, and moving beyond that. We also want to teach on the other side of the coin, our native speakers to give fruitful feedback, not just, oh yeah, that sounds good, that sounds bad, blah, 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 but to attentively listen, to have tolerance for certain things that maybe they wouldn't say a certain way. And I think as a native speaker in a tandem partner like this, you learn more about your own language. What do you find acceptable? Where do people go over a certain point where you say, most native speakers won't understand that? Or I would say it this way, but if you want to say it that way, that's perfectly fine, for the average native speaker, or at least, how could you put it, an open-minded native speaker. Should we use the ELF core? This is something I don't have time to go into, but things like the TH sound, this, that, and the other thing. Should we stress that or not? ELF core says no. I say yes. But anyway, the partners need to be able to give sensitive suggestions. They need to be able to guide their partner in a way that's, non-threatening and helps them rather than scares them, let's say. Okay, what else here? And then the implementation. So this is kind of the heart of the whole thing. This is where we go beyond just reading aloud spontaneously. And you start off with two people, one from, let's say, German, one from English, or learning the other language, let's say, and they mark up their texts with their partner. This is a step that I think should be helpful. I wouldn't say it's always necessary, but again, this is the ideal method. And so marking up the prosodic cues, as I've just shown you, and then the one partner reads aloud. I think with online things like Zoom, it's easy to even record this. And so that way, either you can send it to your partner, or you can do this live, or you can also have it recorded so that you yourself can hear certain things in your own intonation, etc. And then there is review of what has been read aloud and hopefully recorded. And then the native speaker partner gives feedback. Then we do it again, try a second time, see if we can make things sound, that much better, further feedback. And of course, the main thing here is so that people can engage in free discussion. This is not like at the end of Fahrenheit 451, where people have memorized whole books and just spout them out, randomly wandering, talking a book. We want people to be able to engage in free discussion from this. And so hopefully, depending on what content is in these pieces of writing that they're using or reading, they can start talking about those issues. Okay, so it's kind of an icebreaker. And I think at all levels, even up to the native speaker level, it can be an icebreaker for people you don't know, for example. Then we repeat it for the partner tongue. Okay. And that's the basic method. Let's see, what kind of time do I have left? Let's see. I guess I didn't say really who is most appropriate for this. I think very shy people who, even in their native tongue, may not be very, forthcoming with spontaneous language. Perfectionists, those people who sit there and if the grammar isn't exactly as it should be, or they don't have exactly the right word, they don't have the chutzpah to just go and put it out there. Some people can just speak because they're just that kind of person. Most of us won't say anything if we don't feel it's going to be more or less right. Okay. And I think in the context of Circle U, people who have little authentic experience in the country or in the language that is their target. Okay. And so people who are going to do an exchange, Erasmus exchange, for example, and, maybe they've studied the language of the host country for years, but they've never been in those contexts. I think this is ideal to give those people a boost, either before they get to, in this case, Germany, or while they're getting here and getting themselves, their minds into German, and, they go into the bakery and they try to order some Brötchen and they stumble. This is exactly for them, way to get their vocal apparatus speaking German without thinking about it so much. Okay. Let's see here. Challenges. Yeah, we've got some challenges there. I won't talk about tandem mismatch. That's more for something particularly about tandem approaches. I mean, you have to try to get the people to work together. Not always easy. I'd rather talk about logistics. And before the pandemic hit us and Zoom became, a common thing for many people, I thought about how could this work in a classroom situation, with groups of people speaking and reading and so much noise and a cacophony that I knew that I wouldn't be able to stand very long myself. And to me, Zoom gives us some great advantages. First of all, I think reduced tension. I mean, when you're sitting with somebody that you don't know and there's this kind of interpersonal tension going on, I would say that's reduced via Zoom, maybe not for everybody. I think there's also reduced tension in many other ways that I won't go into, social situations. In this case, there's no commuting. You don't have to arrange to meet at a cafe somewhere at a certain time. You just get online, do it. I would say can be better acoustics, but of course people need to, figure out what kind of technology they're using, et cetera. But compared to 10 groups of 2 people in a classroom situation where the noise level just becomes unbearable, I think you would get better acoustics for actually focusing on what somebody is saying. Easy recording and screen sharing, it's, you just record it. And if you want to see it again, there it is. Or if you can't meet at the same time or you have limited time, well, record your reading aloud event first and then talk about it live online or what have you. Breakout rooms, for me, this is a real blessing as a teacher. If I have 10 pairs of people, I can put them in 10 breakout rooms and visit them as they may need it, or just enjoy the silence, International possibilities. And to me, this is so important, I think, for our context, that now people from across the world can do this, okay? If I want to, I don't know, speak to somebody in Sao Paulo or something like that, I can do it and I can learn the Portuguese from them, etc. So for me, this is a huge benefit. And also, I think it would help people going on exchanges to be able to do this before they get to the target country. Okay, and that way they can be prepared for when they get to the airport or their first restaurant experience or what have you, asking a bus driver, is this the way to get to so-and-so? Okay, so, and here you see the cacophony that I was talking about. What do I got? 14. Okay, I won't talk about assessment because it's not necessary that we assess this. I mean, as long as it works for people, that's great. If you want to talk about assessment, I can later, but the main thing is, what are the benefits? What kind of improvements can we expect here? I think simply reading more and more text in, let's just say, English or German, you're going to see how the vocabulary and grammar work together. You're going to look up words, etc. Okay, graphemic, phonemic correspondence. I have to apologize to my students every semester because English is so terrible, and they say, but it's spelled like this. Why is it pronounced like that? It's a horror for other language learners. I mean, compared to German, for example, where what you see on the page, when I try to pronounce it, more or less, that is how it should be pronounced. Whereas with English, it's a real horror. I can't say anything about this for other languages, but you can decide for yourself about that. Just reading aloud with some guidance from a partner can give you much more feeling than simply sitting home reading silently. I would think oral fluency is our main goal with this particular thing here, but also perhaps writing coherence. I mean, if you are writing something and you want to read it out loud for your partner, they can not only help you with your articulation of it vocally, but also maybe, help you with some of the writing itself. Okay, so this could be an add-on, let's call it. Autonomous learning. I think for me, this is really important because I love being a teacher, but I also love training people to be able to function on their own. Okay, and so I think that this way, once the tandem pairs get the structure, get the method, and they can do with it what they like, then it's all theirs. They can just move along, and in a course context, I would be checking with them and monitoring them. But anyway, individual tailoring. If I have 20 students, I can't possibly individual tailor pronunciation problems for everybody. In this case, you have your one person who's going to help you with that. Finding one's own voice in another language. Again, my colleague Dagmar Froning came up with that idea as a real benefit of this. And reduced anxiety. So I think once you get used to speaking the language based on somebody else's writing, hopefully that will reduce your anxiety and increase your confidence to speak yourself. Okay, last but not least here, when I first came to Germany, I improved my German by reading Bertolt Brecht to my partner at the time, and it worked. It really did help me quite a bit. In a course situation, I would have baseline readings. Maybe I won't go into them here because of time, where people would read it at the beginning of the course and then read it again at the end of the course. And we could, based on the recorded versions of that, decide was there improvement or not. But I think the beauty of this is people can read whatever they want. Poetry, dialogues, fiction. Maybe you have an audio book that you can listen to first and then read it out loud. Podcast transcripts, news reports. I think that's always a great place to start. Academic prose and students' own writing. And maybe I'll end this with a self-created tongue twister of my own. And there's a friend of mine, the Chatty Chicken. I'll give you 30 seconds to read this to yourself, and then we're all going to read it out loud together. Okay, are we ready? Yeah, put your sound on. Let's see if we can just break the sound barrier here. Okay, everybody reading out together all at the same time. Okay, come on, put your cameras or your sound on. I don't see everybody doing it. Maybe people fell asleep or something. I'm so boring, I know. Okay, so are we ready? Here we go. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. The chatty chicken, much chocolate,
and he has the chance. He cheerfully chomps it in Chinese churches and munches and munches in France. Chatty chicken chirps and chuckles when it's in the flow, choosing his favorites from a sheep like sheep. Chomping and chirping and chatting, however, he has no real
Okay, peeps, I hope you had fun. With the holidays coming up, I hope you can find some protection and don't end up in the situation of the poor chatty chicken. All right, let's see, where are we here? And, actually, I got it done in 20 minutes. So that's it. Thank you very much. I welcome any questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Christopher, for this very inspirational, fun, motivating activity. I don't know if there's a pressing question now that somebody wants to ask straight away, or if we can keep questions till the end after Amelie has presented her activity.
Okay. That's fine with me. Yeah.
It's okay. Okay, great. Thank you. So then maybe we'll move on to Amelie's practice, and then we'll have some time at the end for the discussions and questions. So thank you for your excellent timekeeping as well. So that's leaving us lots of time for discussion afterwards. So Amelie, the floor is yours now.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for welcoming me and for being here still after a few hours. Christopher, I know your voice for... I'm glad it held up. Let's see if mine does as well. And let's see if my computer, there we go, collaborates with us. There we go. Yeah, read that. So yes, I'm here to introduce and present an initiative that we have developed at CU.mil, which is the Centre for International Education and Languages at King's College London. We decided to integrate journaling into second language learning. You can do it at any level. So this is something that can be applied to any context. And that project aimed to support both students' language skills, obviously, and well-being by creating a space for personal and reflective expression in the target language. The project began as a pilot with a very small team within CU.mil last academic year, and it has grown significantly, as you can see, now offering broader collaboration opportunities. And I really, really want to thank everyone involved here, because it does take dedication and work to keep this project alive. But when we see the impact that it has on students' learning and well-being, it is so worth it. And this is paving the way for a longitudinal study across several universities. As you can see, everyone involved here is doing brilliant work. And of course, we have to thank our students who are participating in this, although, as you will see, they tend to enjoy the experience. And this all started because language learning today is no longer about just mastering grammar and vocabulary. We all know this. It's about supporting the whole learner emotionally, cognitively, socially. And since the pandemic, once again, we have observed a rise in mental health issues among students. Anxiety, exhaustion, disengagement, these are just symptoms, really. And as educators, we are being asked to innovate, to create learning environments that are inclusive, reflective, and responsive to students' emotional needs. So we asked ourselves, how? How can we do that? How can we support students' well-being and academic engagement while also helping them develop their language skills? And journaling emerged as a powerful, low-cost, quite important in our field, and flexible tool to explore ways to support students' well-being, to trigger their academic and cultural exploration, to reduce their anxiety, and more importantly, their examination-related anxiety, and provide a space to improve on language skills. But beyond all of that, beyond emotional regulation and language skill practice, it also created space for them to explore their identity. Quite important at that age. Most of our students in the language center and in language centers as a whole are generally between 18 to 28, 29. We do, of course, have a large range of students, but a bulk of them are around that age where you kind of are still exploring yourself, exploring your identity. Now, it also helps create space for cultural connection between students and teachers, and all of that is essential for sustained learning. Now, of course, to understand why journaling can be so effective in language learning, we drew on research from a few key areas: applied linguistics, educational psychology, narrative theory, and especially life writing. So I'll briefly walk you through the 3 pillars of our framework. The first one is self-efficacy and emotional regulation, some of which Christopher has already mentioned, so this will be nice and easy. Because journaling helps students build confidence in their ability to use the language. So this goes with Bender's theory of self-efficacy that tells us that when students believe they can succeed, then they are more likely to engage and persist. Journaling offers a private, low-pressure space where students can experiment with language without fear of judgment. And that reaches research by Friston and Stark, which shows that expressive writing reduces anxiety, especially around exams. And it all aligns with Krashen's effective filter hypothesis, which suggests that emotional barriers like stress can block language acquisition, and journaling helps lower that filter. Our second pillar is on reflective and metacognitive learning. Because journaling encourages students to think about how they learn and not just what they learn. That's what we call metacognition. Once again, you all know this. And Sankey and colleagues found that reflective writing helps students develop critical thinking and self-assessment skills, which are crucial when you're learning a language. Gibson also showed that journaling supports vocabulary retention, and it helps bridge achievement gaps, especially for students from diverse linguistic backgrounds. And in short, journaling turns language learning into a more conscious, strategic process. Students can write about anything they want, however much they want, and they can go as deep as they want when it comes to learning grammar or vocab or other things, because journaling is also a space for identity exploration, and this is our third pillar, cultural and identity construction. Smith and Watson describe it as a form of life writing. So it's a way for students to narrate their experiences, values, cultural identities. And Kramer reminds us that writing is culturally situated. So students from different backgrounds may have different expectations about what it means to write reflectively. That can become a challenge. We will see later how we address that. But journaling becomes then more than just a linguistic task. It's an intercultural one, because it allows students to negotiate between their own cultural framework and those of the target language. And so together, these 3 pillars show that journaling isn't just a writing exercise. It's a holistic pedagogical tool. It supports emotional resilience, cognitive development, and cultural awareness, all of which are essential for meaningful language learning. So initially, we experimented with the use of these journals in French, Spanish, and Japanese modules from beginner to advanced levels at the Language Center. We have students who come from pretty much every background you can think of, and it has now expanded to even more modules in now 2 universities at UC Louvain. And our university, we're also exploring collaborations with other universities at the moment. So this is something that we need to keep in mind, that the approach has to remain as broad as possible. And this is why we have 2 approaches. The first one is a holistic model where journaling is voluntary or lightly guided with a focus on the writing process. We're not correcting as much, we're not giving as much feedback, we're not focusing on grammar as much. The main bit is for them to write. We also have a formative assessment model where journaling is integrated into weekly assessments, weekly assignments with regular feedback. These can be at home, these can be in class. And then the data is collected through the journals themselves, through informal discussions with students and surveys with written feedback from students, some of which I will show in a minute. But first, here are some examples of journals from both approaches, just for the pleasure of seeing them. At beginner level, as you can see, regardless of the approach, we prioritized simple prompts or triggers with varying degrees of scaffolding to support students, along with models when needed that they could emulate as needed. And the use of models was quite useful when it came to some challenges that we had at beginner level. I'll explain a bit more later. At the intermediate level, journal prompts became more reflective and cultural, inviting students to compare traditions, to explore mental health on a global scale. On the bottom left, you can see surchauffe mental, that's basically burnout. They could reflect a bit on their sense of belonging, describe memories, or create some fake news stories and analyze their cultural impact. And we have a clear example of this right in the middle. And finally, at the advanced level, journal prompts invited students to think critically and creatively about course discussions, about their personal experiences, artistic works, social political issues, their plurilingual identity, and how it shaped their worldview. This led to entries that were slightly longer. And following this, I will show you a quick overview of our findings regarding the impact that regular journaling practice has on students. We're aiming to replicate these results this year because they were very positive. And also we want to explore the practice on the teacher's side a bit more this time in order to create practical tools and documentation for it to be implemented in other places. We have that in place, but we need to go deeper. As far as students were concerned, and when it comes to qualitative insights, journaling fostered a very authentic voice in students and some creative risk-taking. So that was quite interesting to see. Students used their journals to explore deeply personal and culturally rich themes, such as identity, belonging, cultural resilience, emotional resilience, intercultural experiences. And these topics are often constrained in academic writing. So they frequently expressed thoughts that they would not necessarily share in class, and that offered a more holistic view of the learner. So when I said earlier that it is worth it, it is in the sense that it also changes your relationship with your students. You do become automatically closer when you implement this. And so in short, it enabled students to articulate their challenges and successes in learning a new language, and successes, sorry. Reflect on their evolving sense of self in a multilingual environment, and connect their personal histories with the cultures they were studying. This is something we really see in their feedback. They were able to make sense of the language and the culture rather than just understand how it functioned, if that makes sense. So, and when it comes to quantitative outcomes, we observed measurable improvements in well-being, self-efficacy, academic engagement, and language fluency. And this was partly supported by the survey that we did with them. So first, when it comes to well-being, students reported reduced stress and anxiety, particularly around assessments. They enjoyed the practice. They felt more ready, more prepared for assessments after journaling. When it comes to self-efficacy, many of them expressed increased confidence in their ability to use the target language, improve their vocabulary, it helped them better understand grammar rules, and so on and so forth. Then when it comes to academic engagement, journaling encouraged consistent interaction with the language outside of class. They managed to incorporate cultural topics into their journaling. They realized that it helped them understand the themes and discuss in class a bit better. And finally, when it comes to language fluency, regular low-stakes writing helped them become more comfortable with language production, and that is shown by the fact that it's increased their confidence and made them a bit more motivated to learn foreign language. These positive outcomes were especially pronounced when journaling was integrated with structured prompts and feedback. And of course, we asked for written feedback to have a quick look at what students were perceiving, what perceived results were there. One of our favorite bits of feedback from the student is leaving memory with a different language. I didn't change this. This is how they wrote it, which we found absolutely beautiful, all of us. And the responses we will explore highlight journaling, again, not just as a pedagogical tool, but just as a practice that supports emotional, cognitive, and linguistic development, as well as an enhanced student-teacher dialogue which automatically leads to better informed pedagogical practices. And you have here a few examples, a tiny few examples, really. There were so many we had to choose. And we can see that, part of it, there we go. We can see that students reported that they enjoyed expressing their feelings, their difficulties in writing rather than speaking, without any pressure. That opportunity also to develop an inner dialogue in a foreign language was explored in their feedback. They were able to reflect a bit on autonomy and metacognition. They were able to formulate ideas more organically. They also realized they were relying a bit too much on course materials, computers, autocorrect, AI, and so on. And the fact that they were writing this by hand helped them kind of detach from that. And when it comes to identity and culture, they could, again, make sense of certain political, cultural, economical aspects of the environments within the language they're learning. And that was quite enlightening to see that they could make a more personal use of cultural ideas, rather than just simply understand. They could also explore not only interculturality, but interlinguistic skills, especially with that poem in French and Chinese. They could use any languages they knew, and they could feel the difference between the languages. And especially for that feedback, I think it's lovely, their own unique charm, which was, once again, it ties back into the fact that we want them to be proud of how many languages they know, and the fact that they are aware of multilingual and multicultural. They live in a multicultural world. This all leads us to challenges, because of course, we couldn't do this without any challenges, as always. Especially for beginners, there was a fear of making mistakes, which led to some overly cautious or minimal entries, or entries made with AI. So this had to be, we had to show some sensitivity and flexibility in how we introduced journaling and supported it. Similarly, with limited vocabulary and grammar, that often involved a bit of frustration because they struggle to express complex thoughts. If you do it in class, you'll end up with a lot of how do you say, how do you say, how do you say, how do you say? And that's a way for them to manage that frustration. When they do it at home, they can usually use tools and other things. But this can be dealt in different ways, as we'll see in a minute. Some of them were completely unfamiliar with reflective writing. They didn't know what journaling was. It was a completely new concept. And so some of them needed more scaffolding and examples to understand what was expected. Some students, very few, questioned how journaling contributed to their language learning, especially when it wasn't directly linked to assessments. This ties directly with time management, where students sometimes saw journaling as something that did not look enough like the summative assessment. So especially when it was optional or not clearly integrated into the course structure, they deprioritized it. And finally, of course, some cultural barriers, because some students were a bit hesitant to share their personal thoughts in writing or their writing at all. So that also required a bit of sensitivity and flexibility in how we supported everything. So what helped? A few things helped. First, providing prompts and model entries that helped reduce anxiety, clarify expectations, and helped especially beginner students to model sentences and improve and make them their sentences. Offering feedback, even if informal, quite regularly, that encouraged students to take journaling more seriously. We also normalized imperfection in language. We used quite a few ways to tell them that, grammar was not the main focus, it was communication. And weirdly enough, it encouraged them to improve on their grammar in a way that felt less pressurizing. So they did better that way. And finally, of course, when we integrated journaling into assessment, into formative assessment mostly, it did increase their engagement and perceived value. But all in all, we cannot lead such a practice without guidance, feedback, or cultural sensitivity. That is for certain. That takes us to our conclusion, because in summary, this practice of personal and reflective journaling works best when it is supported, structured, and presented as a tool for linguistic and academic development, not simply a task to complete. And it will foster well-being, reflective learning, and cultural inclusion. As I said earlier, we are working on replicating these results, and when it comes to student engagement, but we're also reflecting on the teacher workload and the new relationship that it entails with your students. We aim to continue to expand, so if you're interested and would like to try it with your students, let us know. It will help us inform whatever we set in place for it to be implemented later on. And here's the bibliography and the little quotes that I feel is really relevant to this. Each of us has its own way of emerging from the underworld, mine is by writing. That's from Kafka. And it reminds us that journaling is not just a pedagogical tool. It is a deeply human practice of reflection, resilience, and growth. Thank you very much. That's it for me.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Amelie, for this very interesting and inspiring presentation and description of the journaling project. And thank you for your excellent timekeeping as well. So we have a lot of time left for some questions or comments, remarks. So the floor is open to everybody who would like to ask a question or make a comment.
Can I ask a quick question of Amelie? Yeah. First of all, thanks a lot. It was great. I guess having studied teaching of writing back in the 90s in California, we did a lot of journaling. And to me, it was a great thing in many ways, as you've said. But I found that with 2 courses of 25 or 30 students each, it became quite a burden for me. How big are these classes and how much feedback do the teachers actually give, I guess?
You're right. It does depend on how many students you're doing this with. So some of the people in our team, they're doing it with 1 or 2 modules, so it's going to be 10, 20 students. Some of us, they're doing it with more students. For example, in my case, I'm doing it with a total of 70-something students. One way that we found to manage the workload is that we don't always take journals every week. We will give prompts every week. We will include it either in class or at home, but then we will only pick up everything, let's say, once a month, once every 3 weeks, once every 4 weeks, and tell students that, okay, this is the deadline, per se. You can do it in whatever way you wish. You can rush everything at the end. You can do it every week, bit by bit. It doesn't matter, but I will pick up journals at this date. And it's been a way to manage everything because we could then stagger the workload amongst modules. So that's one way. We're still exploring other ways to make it a bit more manageable for teachers. Yes.
And suggest one small way, maybe, making this part of a tandem reading aloud project where the people would write in their journals and read it aloud to their partner, and then the partner would be in charge of guiding rather than the teachers, more or less. But anyway, yeah, just a suggestion.
That's something we're starting to explore. Actually, it's a bit spoilers, but we've started exploring journaling, but linked to a story that they would have every week. So they would have episode 1 the first week, episode 2 the second week, and so on, which kind of relates to your project because they have to also read the story out loud and they get feedback on that. But it would be interesting for them to do it with a partner and also do the journaling bit and some peer feedback with a partner as well. So we're slowly getting there. But yeah, it's definitely an idea.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if anybody else has a question they'd like to ask. Yes, go ahead. Natasha first and then Åsta.
Okay, thank you. Well, I first of all wanted to thank all the speakers for the wonderful presentations. And from the first to the last one, I kind of see a fine connection because I think all the three topics can be somehow interconnected in our work with students. And I suppose we have all experienced similar challenges in our classrooms in terms of people coming from different backgrounds and knowing different languages, and then our aims to inspire them to use all this knowledge and all the resources, linguistic resources that they actually already possess. One of the challenges which I've been facing recently, and I'm really interested to see or to hear your opinions as well, is I believe that the instant messaging system of writing has already entered our classrooms as well. And sometimes in our students' writings, we can see that they are actually tending already to forget about the basic rules of writing, especially if we encourage them to feel relaxed and to share their thoughts with us on certain topics. Disregarding for the moment the rules of formal writing versus daily communication. But have you also experienced something similar? And do you have any ideas what we can do, except for just telling them that there are differences between formal and informal styles of writing and things like that, when it comes to these intercultural relations and the kinds of language they apply in speech or in writing? Because now we've been talking about things which normally pertain to the area of formal education, right? And formal styles of expressing ourselves in speech or in writing. But have you also experienced these issues, and what do you do about that? Anybody who wishes can answer the question. Thank you.
Well, that's a good question. How to put it? It depends what your objective is. At least as part of this project that I've been describing, it wasn't necessarily the goal to help them differentiate between formal and informal writing. Although, as you said, we do tend to tell them, okay, this is formal, this is informal, and so on. Because the goal is for them to express themselves in a journal that they keep. The only person that really sees that journal is the teacher. But then in other contexts, of course, we do have to teach them the difference between formal and informal language. And I feel that one of the best ways to do this is to explore different formats of writing. Because automatically, depending on the format you're studying and what you want them to do with it, you will explore different kinds of formal and informal writing. For example, if you study how to write an argumentative text in French, I teach French, automatically you will have some language that comes with it because it's very codified, at least in French. And it's one way to teach them, okay, this is formal language. You will use this in that format. You can, of course, use it in other types of formats, but this works for these kinds of texts. And then you can explore other texts. Poems, stories will help you teach literary texts, literary words and expressions, and so on and so forth. So that's one answer amongst many answers, but I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you very much for the answer. I think that it would be worth comparing texts written in different styles, formal and informal, one and the same text in different forms. I think it could also be an interesting activity in class. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your question. And then Åsta had a question or a comment.
Yeah, yes, thank you both for very interesting talks about interesting topics. I mainly have some feedback. First of all, Christopher, I never thought about the reading opportunity in tandems, which is a really good idea. We are now trying to implement tandems also in our courses, and that could be, I think, a lower barrier for getting involved if that's also included. I'm also doing a tandem now with a French mathematics teacher, and it would help me a lot if I could read a bit as well, not just talk, because my level is quite low. So thank you. And Amelie, this is a very beautiful project, and I really like also that they are doing it in handwritten. They write by hand. I think that's an important part of the whole thing, to sit down, get away from the computer and write. I was also worried, like Christopher, about the workload, but I think you answered that well. So how to be aware of how much to kind of comment on and how often. I was also thinking about this can be done also in teacher education, of course. And I know Linda Fisher in Cambridge has written a beautiful chapter reflecting in tranquility, which is about teacher students, language teacher education students who regularly reflect on their experiences while learning and also in practice, and given prompts by Linda, and also not overdoing the commenting. So it's not like she writes long answers, but to be a good listener or a good reader of their reflections. And actually, I've also myself published an article just before summer with a teacher, so an in-service teacher who wrote her whole life story as a language learner and teacher, and I gave her prompts along the way. It ended up with 50,000 words. So this is her story of her professional development, but also how we interacted together to learn from each other by reading and discussing her journey. And I thought I could just share that one in the chat here, if you're interested in having a look. So I think this can be used at many different levels. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Åsta. And then I just have one question for Christopher. So you mentioned that you've been trying to get this project off the ground. So I was just wondering if you've tried it in your own classes, even if it's all English. So if it's students who are learning English, have you tried it in the classroom with them, practicing reading things in English as non-native speakers of English and giving feedback to each other?
I would love to say yes, but no, mainly because I need a group of people that are all non-native speakers of English or are learners of English who have a language that other people would like to learn. And I just haven't had the real situation to do it in my own classes, which are usually C1 and C2 level. I think this would be really ideal for a B2 level, although I think all levels could, get something out of it. And even native speakers, like I said, if you don't know somebody, you want to break the ice, read something aloud to them, read them a newspaper item and talk about it. But I mean, I do use reading aloud as part of when my students do writing for me, and we all go over it together on Zoom, which is great. And then they read it aloud, whatever they've written. So there is some of that. And it does help them, I think, catch their pronunciation issues. But I haven't done this formally, partly to do with problems we've had in our institute in the past decade, which are now transforming into something much better, thanks to Max Muller, who I see here, our new leader. And there was a lot of bureaucratic issues that kept me from doing this, as well as finding regular groups of people who need to learn German, for example. But I think with Circle U and perhaps with Erasmus, I see light at the end of the tunnel, that maybe I can finally get this program in motion and see if it really works.
Okay, great. Thanks. So we have time for two more quick questions. So I have Karine and then Miriam.
Thank you very much for your presentations. It was very interesting, all the presentations. I have concrete questions for Amélie. You said your project works better if you provide students with structured prompts. Maybe there were prompts on the slides, but that wasn't clear to me. I was wondering if you could give us an example. So it's more clarification type of questions. Mm-hmm. If I understand well, your students keep their journals outside of class. It's not something you ask them to do in class. You don't dedicate, let's say, 10 minutes of your class to this project, or does that depend? It's up to the teachers. And final clarification, you said it also works best when it's integrated with the formative assessment. I'm really wondering how you assess such productions or journals. And I'll stop there.
Okay. So, in order, by structured prompts, we mean that we try to implement it as a routine. So, however many times per week you want them to do journaling, it needs to be set in a kind of immutable routine where they know it will happen, when it will happen, and how it will happen. So this could be done in class or at home as part of homework. I know I do both. Certain teachers only do it one way. It really depends on the module, how long their module runs, how many students they have, and so on. And your last question was about formative assessment. So when we do formative assessment, the goal isn't necessarily to assess per se, but it is to offer feed-forward feedback for them to be able to action it and then get better. So most of our feedback, when we include it in regular continuous formative assessment in that way, would be about grammar points that they need to revise, or syntactical issues that they have, or vocabulary and things like that, on top of maybe a slight commentary. If they talk about something that you relate with, you can also have a little dialogue with them. So this is what we do when it comes to formative assessment. When it's more of a holistic practice, we don't focus as much on the grammar, the vocab, and things like that. We kind of just focus on having a dialogue with them, and you just have a look at whatever they write. So that's the difference between the two approaches here. Does that make it clearer?
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you, Amelie. And then Miriam for the last question of the day, or comment.
Thank you, and thank you to all for very inspiring presentations. My question is also for Amelie. And I was thinking about this, about the skill level of the students. What skill level are your students, and have you done it in different, also more beginners courses? What would be kind of the lowest where you would work to do it in the target language, or would it also make sense to do it in a beginner's class in their first language?
We do it every level, from week 1
okay.
beginners class. The secret for a beginners class is to offer a model. So generally the first prompt will be write a letter to someone to introduce yourself, and talk about something you like. And then, for example, in French again, we'll just offer a little text and go, my name is na na na, I like this, I blah 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 blah. And they just kind of have to retake that model and add some vocabulary that, of course, they will probably find online for that first lesson. And that would be the way to start things rolling, really. So the lowest level you can go is as soon as they can build a sentence and introduce themselves, that's it, there you can go.
That's great. But of course the prompts would then reflect the level, obviously.
Yes.
Right. That's really great. Actually, I'm also very interested in what Karin asked for, the prompts. How do you prompt these? But I don't know if we have time for that.
We're building a repository of prompts, and the objective is to be able to share this a bit more widely, so that people can start and know where to start and how to start. We don't have time to go into this. I would need another half hour, but but it exists. It is somewhat. And yeah, I'm very happy to keep the conversation going if you contact me in any way. So,
okay, thank you.
Okay, great. So I'm conscious of the time here. I know we're all very busy people, so I don't want to keep you any longer than necessary. So just before we end the session, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of the speakers today for being here, for giving your time to us, and for sharing your research, your ideas, your interesting projects and activities. Thank you very much. And also a huge thank you to all of the participants for being here today as well, for sharing your time with us too. And I hope that you enjoyed the session and that you will be leaving with lots of new ideas and inspiration for your classes. just to say that if there are any newcomers here who are not familiar with the project, the Language Teachers Nexus project already, and if you would like to get involved, if you'd like to have some more information, if you want to have the contact details of the local coordinator at your home university so that you can get in touch with them, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. You have my email address here or in the email that I sent you with the link for today's webinar. And we'll be happy to get back to you with any information that we can provide. So I don't know, Ferran, if I have covered everything or if there's anything else we need to add.
I think it was the perfect closing.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you very much to everybody again for being here. And I hope you all have a really nice afternoon. Take care and see you soon for the next online event. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.